Hello, I'm Helena Halme. I'm going to be talking to you today about how to write in another language. So why me? Why am I talking to you about this subject? I'm an author of 9 fiction titles and 2 non-fiction books. Apart from my thesis, which I wrote in Swedish, I've written all of my 11 books in English, even though it's my 3rd language. I graduated with a baccalaureate from a college in Finland, got my first master's in marketing from a Swedish school of economics, and an MA in creative writing from Spa University in the UK. You could say I'm addicted to learning. I'm a prize-winning author of a thesis on British politics, very handy especially today, and many of my books have been #1 bestsellers in their categories on Amazon. Apart from writing, I also help other authors write, publish and market their books, something which I enjoy immensely. But back to writing in another language. Since I've been writing in my 3rd language for some 15 years now, and since my language choice is something I get asked a lot about, I decided to put down in a book what my 10 tips for writing in another language would be. But here today I will give you as much information as I can in the short time that we have. I will talk about why authors choose to write in another language. I'll talk a little bit about what language is, and also about the unique perspective someone writing in another language can gain on the human condition. I'll talk about why it's even more important to such writers to check and recheck their work and the importance of editing. Finally, I will also tell you how to beware your inner critic. So why write in another language? There are many benefits to writing in another language, which is why authors such as Vladimir Nabokov, Joseph Conrad, Elif Shafak, Karen Blixen and many more have decided to use language that is not their own to set down their stories. If you are an author, being able to blend into your surroundings is an invaluable tool. Writers are the world's great observers, and what's better than being able to listen to conversations in the local tongue of a foreign country and then make up stories based on what you've heard and seen for a new audience? Conversely, this ability to move easily from one culture to another also produces a certain degree of detachment. Feeling as though you belong to several cultures often makes you an observer in all of them. There's been research into how humans behave when communicating in another language, which found that decisions made in a foreign language are not as affected by emotional biases as those made in a native language. This means that you gain an increased degree of detachment when writing in another language. Your brain lacks the normal judgments shaped by the long-held traditions and experience of native speakers. Detachment from the usual moral and social judgments can be a huge advantage when telling a story. It means that your voice is different and your work unique. Again, this gives you a new way of looking at the human condition. You can see how, if just talking in another language gives you a degree of detachment and a different perspective on life, how this can enrich your writing. You can look at the world in a completely different way. In addition to the unique viewpoint, you will also have an expert knowledge of other cultures, people and places. Writing in another language also gives you a unique style. Naturally, you have to ensure that your language is correct, something which I'll talk a little more about later on. But if you write in a language that is not your mother tongue, you can bring to the work a sense of another place and culture in a completely new way. Using another language forces you to think differently, which can be hugely inspiring to an author. As an artist, being able to use global perspective through writing in several languages can give your work an edge and an advantage. Some words cannot be translated easily, so being able to move between languages, you can examine expressions more closely and write in different ways. Turkish author Elif Shafak, who I mentioned earlier, says that for her, every new language is an additional zone of existence. Imagine what inspiration having several zones of existence in your writer's toolbox could give you. If your chosen other language is English, you can certainly expect a larger readership for your books than if you were writing in some other smaller language. My mother tongue, Finnish, for example, is spoken by around 5 million people, while English is the third most spoken native language in the world. It is the most widely learned second language and is either the official language or one of the official languages in almost 60 sovereign states. There are also more people who have learned English as a second language than there are native speakers. Writing in several languages will also provide you with several markets. If you have German, for example, what better way to use that language skill but to translate your own work? A Finnish author, Emmi Itäranta, uses her bilingualism to first write a chapter in Finnish and then write the same chapter in English. She publishes both versions simultaneously, which gives her a huge market advantage. But let's get back to a few definitions. So what is language? According to Collins' English Dictionary, language is a system of communication which consists of a set of sounds and written symbols which are used by people of a particular country or region for talking or writing. So language is a means of communication using words specific to that country. There are today around 7,000 different tongues spoken, and although this number is diminishing by the day, sadly, some say that in 100 years' time we've lost half of that number, but still there are lots of different languages. Around half of the world's population describe themselves as bilingual, and many people speak several languages fluently. There are those who have been brought up by using 2 languages, and there are those like me who learned the second language early on in their lives. But it's all not good news. Linguism refers to linguistic discrimination against somebody based on their use of language. It can include their vocabulary, their accent, or their use of grammar. If you take notice, there are several examples of this around your community, whether it is snobbish behaviour towards people with regional accents, or a way of speaking that reveals their race. In the UK, recently a well-known actor was asked to posh up her northern accent because the character she was playing had been to university. The TV producers felt that regional accent made the actor sound uneducated. Just think. To me, that's quite unbelievable. I've certainly experienced my share of linguism, beginning when I first read out my piece of writing at the MA in Creative Writing course. The very, very first comment by a fellow student was, "It sounds like a translation to me, and I don't like foreign books." This completely floored me. But I went on to pass the course with flying colours and to publish several books and to entertain thousands of readers with my stories in English. So, as you embark on your writing adventure, you must remember that sometimes those who've never mastered another language cannot understand that writing in another language is not as hard and certainly not as absurd as they think. On the contrary, it's enriching and thrilling. I spoke previously in the previous slide about the changes that speaking another language causes in human behaviour. Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Emperor, said to have another language is to possess a second soul. I certainly agree with that statement. In a recent study, it was found that using language that is not your mother tongue affects your decision making, as I mentioned before, reducing emotional reactivity, increasing psychological distance, and inducing more pragmatic judgments. This means emotional reactions are buffeted in those using another language. Just think of yourself when speaking another language on holiday, for example. Isn't it easier to dodge a bus fare or pretend you don't speak the language to get away without paying for something? Or another example. When learning a new language, isn't it often the worst words, the swear words, that we wish to know first? And when you do curse in another language, it doesn't feel as if you're using such offensive language. Try saying a swear word in another language and then repeat that same word in your mother tongue. Try it now. I'll give you a few minutes. It feels different, right? I won't swear on this slide, I promise. The language structure itself also affects how we behave and see things. For example, when describing an event in English, we use the neutral form I broke my arm, whereas in Spanish, for example, we say my arm broke. If you say that you yourself broke your arm in Spanish, it would seem as if you went out of your way to harm yourself, which would be classified as a very disturbed action. You can see how this kind of different use of the neutral form can affect how society works. Another way language affects society can be found in my mother tongue, the Finnish. The language is completely gender neutral, as it has it has no distinct female or male pronouns like he or she, but a common gender neutral han. This lack of gender is also quite significant when writing fiction in Finnish. You have to work a lot harder at letting the reader know which character is speaking, or whose thoughts and emotions you are describing. An inability to move easily from one culture to another through language also produces a certain degree of detachment, as I said before. Feeling as though you belong to several cultures often makes you an observer in all of them. As an author, being able to blend into your surroundings is an invaluable tool. Writers are world's great observers, and what's better than being able to listen to conversations in a local tongue or a foreign country and then make up stories based on what you've heard and seen for a new audience. I often feel that had I not moved countries so many times, I would not have had the compulsion to write. So how can you use this unique perspective to write in another language? I often say that one of the reasons I don't write in Finnish is because my mother tongue is because if I did, I'd probably be crying all the time. My books are quite emotional, and I often go into deep, dark places to discover the true emotions of my characters. In English, I'm able to remain more detached, almost as if watching my characters move independently of me. There's a movie reel in front of me, and all I have to do is write down what happens. I have a certain distance from my story, which I know is only there because I write in English, my third language. Many authors describe the writing process in a similar way, even if they use their native tongue. However, when writing in a foreign language, the detachment is definitely heightened. You can also use vocabulary and scenes that are more extreme than those that native speakers might use. You can become bolder and braver in your descriptions and expressions. If you're writing a story based on real events, your sense of being exposed in revealing your true emotions or those of the characters in your story, be they fictional or real, is more controlled. You can delve deeper into the characters' motivations and feelings without the unconscious sense of judgment inherited from culture via the native language. As a non-native writer, you see the world around you with fresh eyes, remember. This vision can result in unusual interpretations of the human condition, as I said before. Isn't this what all writers dream about? Being able to describe characters, places and events in your books in a new way? On the other hand, you may overshoot with your characters' actions and emotions. It is possible to alienate your audience by being too honest, too violent, too sensual and so on. But this heightened way of writing may become your particular style, which will set you apart from the other writers in your genre. Difference, as long as you are able to communicate with your readership, is always good. Being too forceful in your writing may offend the sensibilities of the readers in your country where the language is spoken. However, with an international readership, this is rarely an issue. If, for example, you write in English and this is your non-native language, you are sure to find an audience in the many other non-native speakers or regions where English is spoken, even if you come across as too radical in Britain. And use your foreignness. The biggest advantage of writing in a foreign language is that different voice you can achieve as a writer. There are many ways you can take advantage of this difference. Set your story in your native country. As writers, we are told to write what you know. At the same time, readers often ask for books that can take them somewhere new. So why not use your uniqueness to your advantage and set a book in the country or countries in which you grew up? Your experiences from your home will be tremendously interesting to people in other countries. Share your authentic viewpoint and tell a story set in a place you know intimately. Or you can make all of your characters in the same nationality as you, or let someone from your new adopted country or language come and live or visit your home. As a person who has experienced life in more than one country, you're in a wonderful position to show how your home country looks to outsiders, as well as what it's like to live there. You are in a unique position to tell the story of someone who decides or is forced to live somewhere else. What culture clashes did they encounter when they moved to your new country? What did you miss from home? Food, ways of doing things like queuing for buses or visiting doctors may seem mundane to you, but these details are excellent in capturing the differences between countries and cultures. Describe your displacement. Make one of your characters the same nationality as you and describe living in a new place through his or her eyes. Again, this ability to look at your new country with detachment adds richness. Many other authors, particularly those who've never lived abroad, will envy your in-depth knowledge of displacement. As I've said before, to have a new and distinctive viewpoint of the human condition is what all authors seek. What's more, many people move from one country to another, but very, very few decide to take the often scary step of writing about their experiences. So be bold, be brave, and use the unique viewpoint and voice you have as an author writing in another language. Your ability to describe both your home country and your displacement in your new adopted home will give your work authenticity. To add to this, don't shy away from using local words and expressions when describing your home country. They add spice to the story and deepen the reader's sense of being transported to a new, very different place. I talked earlier a little bit about linguism. There is a way of getting around this, and that is turning in a clean copy. When writing in a language that is not your mother tongue, it's even more important to get the grammar and the text right than it is if you were writing in your native language. Whether we like it or not, once a reader, a literary agent, a reviewer, a publisher knows that you're not writing in your mother tongue, they will be looking for evidence of your inadequacies. This may be linguism, but language discrimination, but we have to be realistic. Readers need to hear the foreign voice, but not to be jarred by it. The only way to arm yourself against prejudice is to turn in a clean copy. Nothing puts a potential reader off your text more than an incorrect use of language. A wrong preposition, a spelling mistake, or misuse of a proverb will remind the reader that they are reading someone else's words, and that this someone isn't writing in their mother tongue. An error will break the spell of the story and ultimately will make the reader to stop reading and cast your book aside, and we don't want that, do we? Good grammar might seem old-fashioned, but readers still care about correct use of language, even if they may not know it. Mistakes in the text can stop the reader from suspending disbelief. Sometimes you can add some incorrect language uses to show your character's personality and origin. Agatha Christie's Poirot is well known for getting little British colloquialisms wrong, but Christie knew what she was doing. These mistakes in his English language are by no means accidental, but a way to establish the character of Poirot, together with his particular dress sense, obsessive cleanliness, and dislike of English food. Many authors use this method to distinguish their characters. They may just use local or a foreign accent without actual error. If you write about your home country or nationals, you can have a field day with this method. You, more than anyone, will know exactly what common mistakes your countrymen and women make. However, you must make sure these mistakes are clearly made by the characters and that the rest of the copy is clean. So check,
and recheck your spelling and grammar and any common expressions you are using. In addition to spelling, grammar and sayings and expressions, there are many areas of specific terminology that you must be careful to get right. Similarly, the use of modern slang, words for romantic encounters, or even the descriptions of a corpse or dead body have to ring true to your readers. Of course, you can translate an expression word for word from a foreign language if the character is foreign, but you have to let the reader know that you are using an expression that is not commonly used in the English language, if the other language that you're writing is in English, that is. It's important that you don't alienate your reader by taking them away from the story with a saying or a word that doesn't sound right. Don't forget you need your reader to suspend disbelief. There are many online tools to use nowadays. I mean, writing in another language is so much easier today than it was when I started out. Or there are online thesauruses and dictionaries instead of the heavy tomes that we had to lug around. I also use Grammarly. It's a useful software tool that corrects your language as you write. And with Word and Scrivener, the two of the pieces of software that I use to write everything, I rely on their correction tools. You can also define there if you're using, for example, American or UK English if you write in English. And then there are word lists. In addition to online dictionaries and grammar aids, there are useful lists of words and phrases connected to particular situations such as corpses and romantic encounters, or love scenes, or excitement and happiness. There are even things like eye color charts. And there's a lot of writing advice online too, in blogs, YouTube videos and podcasts and online conferences like this one. I'm sure you know many more, so just have a field day online. Let's now look at how you can turn that clean copy in, i.e. how you can publish a book that is free of errors and it reads like as if the writer was native speaker. Even though you have a unique style, you still have to remember you have to turn in a book or produce a book that will sound right to the reader. As an author writing in another language, your first reader should ideally be a native speaker. You should also use several first readers as well as professional editors to iron out problems and to get feedback on your manuscript. Your first native reader can be anybody, but I do find it easier to work with the same person on all my books. Over the years, the first reader gets to know your style, recognizes the phrases that are unique to you, and is able to tell what you mean by them. As writers in another language, you tend to use different kinds of expressions, so therefore it's very important that that first reader gets to understand what you're trying to say. Research and using expert advice is also important for any writer, but for the author who writes in another language it's even more vital that you know the correct terminology, slang or common expressions for any given subject. I mentioned this briefly before. If you're using a second or third language, research is particularly important, even when writing about matters that you know intimately, because you might know those intimate details in another language and then you have to translate them into English or whatever the language is that you're using. Find an expert for any part of your manuscript that requires specific terminology, but as well as an expert, it's important for a professional editor to have the final say in the language that you use. I also use beta readers, but I tend to use beta readers after I've given them my work to an editor. Beta readers, if you don't know, are a group of readers who have put their hands up and said, yes, I want to read this book before it goes to print, and then I will comment on it, see if whatever I like, if it's the characters or the plot or whatever. And these ones are particularly useful for writers who write in another language because they can tell you what's wrong with it, what they haven't understood. But as I said, I tend to have mine edited first and then send it to the beta readers. It's just the way I do things. After you finish readers and several other readers, to read a particular field if you need them, and look through your work, you need to employ a professional editor to correct and proofread your work. I cannot emphasize this more. It is so important. Employing an editor also have very many benefits. Firstly, you get an unbiased professional opinion of your manuscript, as well as the actual language, including spelling mistakes, wrong prepositions, and correcting the tense, the order of the adjectives, and so on. An editor will also line edit the work, i.e. look at the plot and the characters and see if it all fits and sounds feasible. I would say that if you have limited funds to invest in the production of a book, this is one step you really must not skip on. This applies especially to authors who write in another language. As an author in another language, your strengths are in your unique storytelling. You can take the reader to places they may not have heard of, let alone experienced. Equally, you can create characters who are different and intriguing, but you have to work a little harder to make sure your language is faultless, while still being particular to you. Employing professionals to help you achieve this clean copy is therefore vital. Having said all of the above about the importance of publishing a clean, error-free book, don't forget that you are in a unique position to write in a new and exciting way. So beware your inner critic. There are several ways in which you can try to silence this inner critic while you're writing. Writers have a wonderful ability to examine other authors' work closely. We can analyze how other authors in our genre write. We can learn from how they use language, the way they tell a story, how they describe characters, handle the backstory, or use dialogue to bring the story forward. In the privacy of our homes, or in a classroom or coffee shop, we can study any piece of writing and take useful lessons from it. In other words, we can read and learn. When I began writing in English, I didn't give up reading books in Finnish and Swedish. But during my year of my MA in creative writing, when we read a new book every week, I found that my English became better and more fluent. Then something strange happened. After the course, I found that if I read a book in Finnish or Swedish, it was harder to switch to writing in English. Even going on an extended visit to Finland or Sweden, or having friends or family visit me in London, had the same effect on my writing. So I gave up reading books in Finnish and Swedish. My recommendation if you are starting out, writing your first novel or non-fiction title in another language, is to put aside your native tongue. Completely immersing yourself in the language you are going to use will boost your writing immensely. All writers love people watching and listening to other people's conversations. As a writer in another language, this kind of eavesdropping is even more vital. When on a bus, train, street, in a cafe, or even in a gym, listen in on conversations and note down words and expressions that you find new and interesting. Think about what would be the equivalent in your own language. This will help you remember them when you come to write. Don't, however, try to use direct translations of your own in your text. It's very rare that expressions transfer easily between languages and cultures. I've tried many a time to get such expressions past my first readers and editors. Unless, of course, your character speaks English as a second language and he or she uses a phrase wrongly. Think Poirot. In this case, you are describing the character through the language he or she uses. And write with confidence. I've emphasized in the previous chapters the importance of checking and rechecking your work. I've also discussed using online tools to help you write in grammatically correct language without spelling mistakes, as well as using native speakers as first readers. Doing your research and seeking help from experts to ensure you are employing the correct terminology is also vital. Using a professional editor is by far the most important step in ensuring your language is polished and will not be noticed by the reader, thus allowing them to suspend disbelief and enjoy your story, blog or non-fiction title. I've also recommended that you read other books to learn from authors writing in the language you're planning to use. But it is also very important that you do not let other authors' words or all the technical issues with language stop you from writing. Don't forget that writing is a creative process that needs an open, positive mind. You need to be confident that you can produce the right words and sentences to describe serious events and make up an engaging story for your readers to enjoy. So the more you write in another language, the better at it you will become. This is why I started my blog in 2007. I needed the discipline of turning out a blog post each week. That blog, which is titled Helena's London Life, is now my website, and although the blogging is rather different now, I still try to write a post at least once every month. The first blog gave birth to my most successful novel, The English Heart, so I will forever be grateful for that, and I will never stop blogging. So try not to let your inner critic of your use of non-native language stop your flow. Remember that the first draft of your manuscript, whether you are a native speaker or not, is just that, a draft. Everyone has their work corrected, so write freely. It's the meaning of the words as well as the language that is important. All writers use several first readers, editors and proofreaders to give feedback and correct their work. You can edit the book until the cows come home, but if you haven't written anything, there will be nothing to edit. I hope I've given you inspiration to go ahead and write in another language, because only you can write that book. The best way to start something is just to go ahead and do it. It's true that writing in another language needs a little more checking and editing than if you were to write in your own tongue. However, there are also many positive aspects to writing in another language. As an author who can write in more than one language and is familiar with different cultures, you are well placed to describe the human condition in a fresh way. You can gain a certain sense of detachment from the subject matter, and you can take your readers to another place that they may not have experienced in the same way as you have, or a native have, or you as a native have. And only you can write that book. So go ahead, take the plunge and begin writing in another language. I hope you've enjoyed this very short talk on writing in another language. If you'd like to find out more, my book, titled simply Write in Another Language, is now out in both paperback and Kindle format. You can find out about my fiction books on my website helenahalme.com, and you can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, etc. under the same name, Helena Halme. So keep writing, and bye for now.